I want a divorce. The words came through my phone speaker while I was folding laundry in our bedroom. No preamble, no emotion, just 5 words that were supposed to shatter my world. I placed the towel I was holding onto the bed, my hands perfectly steady. Okay, I replied calmly. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. This wasn't the reaction Trevor expected. He'd probably rehearsed this conversation a dozen times, anticipating tears or anger. Instead, I gave him nothing. Okay, that's all you have to say. His voice carried confusion now, maybe even disappointment. I could picture him sitting in his downtown office, doors closed, expecting drama he could use later to paint me as unstable. What else would you like me to say? I asked, continuing to fold. The conversation ended shortly after, with Trevor promising to come home later to discuss details. I hung up and walked to my home office, pulling out a locked drawer. Inside was a folder I'd been building for 3 months. My name is Fallon Pierce. I'm 42 years old, and until 3 months ago I thought I had a stable marriage. Trevor and I had been together for 16 years, married for 14. We had no children by choice, focusing instead on our careers. I worked as a corporate event planner, running my own successful business from home. Trevor was a commercial real estate broker with a firm downtown. Our life looked perfect from the outside. Nice house in the suburbs, annual vacations, respected in our community. But perfect lives often hide ugly truths. 3 months ago, I noticed small changes. Trevor started working late more often. He became protective of his phone, taking it everywhere, even to the bathroom. He bought new cologne, expensive stuff he'd never worn before. One evening, I asked to use his phone because mine was charging upstairs. The panic in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. That night, while he slept, I checked his messages. Her name was Becca Hollies. 28 years old, worked as an assistant at a competing real estate firm. The messages went back 7 months. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. Trevor had promised her things. A condo in the city center, vacations to Europe, a life of luxury. He told her I was cold and distant, that our marriage had been dead for years. He'd painted himself as the suffering husband, finally finding true love. The rage I felt that night nearly consumed me, but I didn't wake him. I didn't scream or throw things. Instead, I took photos of everything. Every message, every promise, every lie. Then I put his phone back exactly where he'd left it and went downstairs to think. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wouldn't just divorce Trevor. I would let him destroy himself, and I would orchestrate every step. Trevor owned 40% of our joint assets. When we married, I'd been the one with family money. My parents had left me a substantial inheritance, which I'd foolishly allowed Trevor to convince me to invest in joint accounts and properties. He'd insisted it showed trust. Now I understood it was just access. Our house was in both names. Our investment portfolio was joint. Our savings accounts were shared. But 3 things remained mine alone. First, my business and all its accounts. Second, a trust fund from my grandmother that Trevor had never known the full value of. Third, my rental property downtown, a small building I'd inherited before we married. Over the past 3 months, I'd been quietly moving money. Nothing obvious, just small transfers that looked like business expenses or personal spending. I'd consulted with a divorce attorney who specialized in high-conflict cases. I'd gathered evidence of Trevor's affair. And most importantly, I'd started planting seeds. The key to my plan was simple. Trevor needed to think he was in control. He needed to believe he was orchestrating his perfect exit, moving money, making plans, preparing for his new life with Becca. What he didn't know was that every move he made, I was watching. I'd installed monitoring software on our home computer that he used for personal finances. Nothing illegal, just parental control software that happened to log everything. I watched as he researched divorce laws in our state. I saw him calculate how much he thought he'd get in a settlement. I read his emails to his lawyer discussing strategy. Trevor was planning to claim my business had grown because of his financial support. He intended to argue for 50% of everything, including my company's value. His lawyer had advised him to document any contributions he'd made to my business over the years. I watched him create fake receipts and backdated emails. He was building a fraud case and documenting every step for me. 2 weeks after that phone call, Trevor came home with papers. "I had my lawyer draw these up," he said, sliding a folder across our kitchen table. "I think you'll find the terms fair." I skimmed through them without showing emotion. He wanted 60% of our joint assets, citing his larger contributions to our lifestyle. He wanted half my business value, claiming he'd supported it financially and emotionally. He wanted the house, offering to buy out my share at below market value. It was robbery disguised as fairness. "I need time to review with my attorney," I said calmly. Trevor's jaw tightened. He'd expected me to either cave immediately or fight. My calm response unsettled him. "Of course," he replied. "Take a few days, but Fallon, I hope we can keep this civilized. No need for lawyers to drag this out and eat up our assets." Translation: he didn't want me getting professional advice that would expose how unfair his proposal was. That evening, I met with Juliet Romano, my divorce attorney. She was in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "This is insulting," Juliet said, tossing Trevor's proposal onto her desk. "He's trying to intimidate you into accepting theft." "I know," I replied. "Let him think it's working." Juliet leaned back in her chair, studying me. "You have something planned." "I do. Trevor has been systematically moving money from our joint accounts. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger immediate red flags. He thinks I haven't noticed." I pulled out my documentation. Bank statements highlighting the transfers. Screenshots from the monitoring software showing his planning. Evidence of his affair and the promises he'd made to Becca. "He's going to file for divorce claiming abandonment of the marriage," I continued. "He's going to paint me as a cold, distant wife who focused on work instead of our relationship. What he doesn't know is that I've documented his affair, his financial fraud, and his plans to deceive the court." Juliet smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "What's your timeline?" 2 more weeks, I said. "I want him to feel completely confident. I want him to move more money, make bigger promises to Becca, dig his hole deeper. And then I file first. Emergency motion to freeze all assets, full disclosure of the affair and financial misconduct. I want him blindsided completely." Juliet nodded approvingly. "I'll prepare everything. But Fallon, once we do this, there's no going back. It's going to get ugly." "It's already ugly," I replied. "I'm just making sure everyone else sees it too." That night, I went home and cooked dinner like nothing was wrong. Trevor came home late, claiming a client meeting. He smelled like Becca's perfume. I said nothing. After dinner, he retreated to his office to work. I knew he was actually moving more money and messaging Becca. I sat in our living room, sipping wine, and waited. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The next 2 weeks were theater. I played the part of the defeated wife perfectly. I seemed distracted during conversations with Trevor. I spent more time in my office with the door closed, letting him think I was avoiding him. I even staged a phone call with a friend where I quietly cried about my failing marriage, knowing Trevor was listening from the hallway. It was manipulation, yes, but so was everything he'd done to me for 7 months. During this time, Trevor grew bolder. He moved larger amounts of money, 20,000 here, 15,000 there. He was preparing his nest egg with Becca. He started leaving earlier for work and coming home later. Sometimes he didn't come home at all, texting that he was staying at a hotel near a property showing. I knew he was with her. Through my attorney, I had a private investigator documenting everything. Photos of them at restaurants, videos of them entering her apartment together, time-stamped evidence of every lie. Trevor's mistake was underestimating me. He saw a wife who had grown comfortable in marriage, a woman who wouldn't fight because fighting was uncomfortable. He forgot who I was before we married. I built my business from nothing. I negotiated contracts with Fortune 500 companies. I managed million-dollar events where one mistake could destroy careers. I didn't avoid conflict. I strategized around it. On a Wednesday morning, exactly 3 weeks after Trevor's divorce phone call, everything changed. Trevor left for work at his usual time. He'd been particularly cheerful lately, probably because he thought his plan was working perfectly. An hour after he left, a courier arrived at his office with documents. Divorce papers, filed by me. Emergency motion to freeze all joint assets. Restraining order preventing him from accessing our joint accounts. Detailed evidence of his affair and financial fraud attached as exhibits. His secretary signed for the package. I'd specifically instructed the courier to deliver it in person, in front of witnesses. My phone rang 20 minutes later. Trevor's voice was barely controlled rage. "What the hell did you just do?" "I filed for divorce," I replied calmly. "I thought that's what you wanted. You froze our accounts. I can't access anything. Those are joint accounts that you've been systematically draining," I said. The court agreed that emergency protection was necessary. "This is insane, Fallon, you can't do this." "Actually, I can, and I did." "The hearing for the temporary restraining order is tomorrow at 10. I suggest you have your lawyer there." I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking now, but from adrenaline, not fear. The first move had been made. Now I waited to see how Trevor would react. He didn't disappoint. Within an hour, his lawyer had called mine, threatening countersuits. They claimed I'd acted in bad faith, that I'd violated Trevor's rights. Juliet calmly responded with our evidence package. The affair documentation, the financial transfers, the fake receipts he'd created. The threats stopped immediately. The emergency hearing the next day was brief. Trevor showed up with his lawyer, both looking confident they could quickly dismiss my restraining order. That confidence evaporated as Juliet presented our evidence. Bank records showing systematic transfers from joint accounts to Trevor's personal account over 3 months. Screenshots of messages between Trevor and Becca discussing money and plans. The fake receipts he'd created to support his claim against my business. Most damaging was a recorded phone call between Trevor and his lawyer, obtained legally through disclosure requirements, where Trevor explicitly discussed hiding assets from me. The judge was a woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen this pattern before. She reviewed the evidence with an expression that could freeze water. "Mr. Pierce," she said finally, looking over her glasses at Trevor, "did you actually create false documentation to support claims against your wife's separate property business?" Trevor's lawyer jumped in. "Your Honor, we'd like to explain the context. That's a yes or no question, counselor." Trevor had no choice. "I may have reconstructed some financial records that were lost," he said carefully. "Reconstructed or fabricated?" the judge asked. The silence answered her question. She ruled in my favor on every point. All joint accounts remained frozen. Trevor was prohibited from making any large purchases or financial transfers. An independent forensic accountant would be appointed to review all marital assets and trace any hidden money. The house would remain in my possession during proceedings, since it was my separate property that had been refinanced into joint ownership without proper documentation of Trevor's contributions. Trevor's face went bright red as each ruling was announced. He kept glancing at me, probably wondering how I'd pulled this off. I maintained my calm expression throughout. After the hearing in the courthouse hallway, Trevor cornered me while our lawyers talked. "You planned this," he hissed. "You've been planning this the whole time." "Yes," I replied simply, "just like you planned your affair and your financial fraud. Becca and I are in love. You wouldn't understand that. You've always been cold." I smiled then. "Trevor, I was never cold. I was just never as foolish as you thought I was." The next few weeks revealed the true extent of Trevor's planning. The forensic accountant's preliminary report showed he'd moved almost $90,000 from our joint accounts. Some went to his personal accounts. Some went to Becca. He'd bought her jewelry, paid her rent for 3 months, and made a down payment on a luxury car in her name, all using our marital assets. He'd also taken out a personal loan using our house as collateral without my knowledge or signature. That was fraud. Clear, prosecutable fraud. When Juliet showed me the report, I felt vindicated. "We can pursue criminal charges if you want," she said. "The forged signature on the loan documents is enough." I considered it. Part of me wanted to see Trevor face criminal consequences, but another part of me knew that would complicate the divorce and delay my freedom. "Let's use it as leverage," I decided. "File the information with the court, make sure his lawyer knows we could prosecute. That should motivate a quick, fair settlement." Trevor's confidence was gone now. His lawyer was pushing him to settle, knowing they had no winning position. Becca had apparently distanced herself after learning the money Trevor had been spending on her was stolen marital funds. She didn't want to be caught up in fraud charges. According to my investigator, she'd blocked Trevor's number and told friends at work the relationship was over. Trevor was alone now, facing the consequences of his choices. He'd lost his girlfriend, his money, and soon, his marriage. The settlement negotiation happened in a conference room at Juliet's office. Trevor sat across from me, looking 10 years older than he had a month ago. His lawyer laid out their position. Trevor would accept a 40-60 split of joint assets in my favor, acknowledging his financial misconduct. He would sign a quit-claim deed giving me full ownership of the house. He would relinquish any claim to my business or separate property. In exchange, I would agree not to pursue criminal charges for the forged loan documents. Not good enough, Juliet said before I could respond. Your client systematically defrauded Mrs. Pierce and committed multiple acts of fraud against financial institutions. A 60-40 split barely covers the money he stole, much less compensates for the emotional distress and reputational damage. Trevor's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. What are you proposing? 70-30 split of all joint assets in Mrs. Pierce's favor. Mr. Pierce assumes all marital debt, including the fraudulent loan he took out. Mrs. Pierce retains the house and all separate property with no buyout required. Mr. Pierce pays her attorney fees, and he signs a binding agreement never to make any public statements about Mrs. Pierce, the marriage, or the divorce. Trevor exploded. That's robbery. I'll have nothing left. You'll have 30% more than you deserve, I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken directly to him during the meeting. You stole from me, Trevor. You lied to me. You committed fraud. This settlement keeps you out of jail. The room fell silent. Trevor's face cycled through anger, denial, and finally defeated acceptance. Fine, he said eventually. I'll sign. The papers were drawn up within a week. Trevor signed everything without further protest. His lawyer probably advised him that any other approach would end worse for him. The divorce was finalized 30 days later, faster than most because we had a complete settlement agreement. I kept the house, 70% of our joint investments, and my business untouched. Trevor took his 30%, his personal debt, and his damaged reputation. The story had spread through our social circle. People knew about the affair, the financial fraud, the lies. Trevor went from respected real estate broker to cautionary tale. His firm quietly pushed him out, not wanting the association with someone who'd committed financial fraud. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state, trying to start over. I should have felt triumphant, and part of me did. But mostly I felt tired. Divorce, even when you win, is exhausting. The emotional energy required to stay strategic instead of reactive had drained me. For weeks after the finalization, I simply existed. I worked, I ate, I slept. I didn't celebrate or grieve. I was numb. Slowly, though, life began to feel normal again. I redecorated the house, removing any trace of Trevor's presence. I renovated my home office into the space I'd always wanted. I took the trip to Italy I'd been postponing for years. I started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during my marriage, women who'd stepped back when I got wrapped up in being Trevor's wife. One of them, Holly, met me for coffee 3 months after the divorce finalized. You seem different, she observed. Lighter somehow. I feel different, I admitted. Like I've been holding my breath for years and finally exhaled. Any regrets about how you handled things? Holly asked carefully. I thought about it. Did I regret the manipulation, the strategic planning, the way I'd orchestrated Trevor's downfall? No, I said finally. Trevor made his choices. He chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. I just made sure he faced consequences. If I'd been emotional or reactive, he would have taken everything and painted me as the villain in his story. Instead, you took control of the narrative, Holly said. Exactly, and that's what I'd tell any woman in a similar situation. Don't react. Document everything, get professional help, build your case, then act decisively. Holly raised her coffee cup in a toast. To taking control. I clinked my cup against hers. To taking control. 6 months after the divorce, I expanded my business. I hired 2 assistants and took on bigger corporate clients. The events I planned got larger and more complex. I was traveling for work, meeting new people, building a life that was entirely mine. I dated occasionally, nothing serious. After Trevor, I wasn't in a rush to trust someone with my heart again, but I wasn't closed off to possibility. I'd learned that I was stronger than I'd known, that I could face betrayal and not just survive, but strategically dismantle the person who betrayed me. That wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was power. A year after Trevor's phone call, I received an unexpected message. It was from Becca Hollies. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. What could she possibly want to discuss? Curiosity won out. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, somewhere public and neutral. Becca looked different than she had in the photos my investigator had taken. She seemed smaller somehow, less confident. Her expensive clothes and jewelry were gone, replaced with more modest choices. Thank you for meeting me, she said as I sat down. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, I replied honestly. What do you want? She took a deep breath. I wanted to apologize. I know that sounds hollow after everything, but I mean it. I was stupid and selfish. Trevor told me your marriage was over, that you didn't care about him anymore. I believed him because I wanted to. He lied to both of us, I said. It wasn't forgiveness, just acknowledgement of fact. I know that now, Becca continued. After everything fell apart, after he lost his money and his reputation, he tried to move in with me, wanted me to support him while he rebuilt. When I said no, he turned nasty, called me names, said I'd ruined his life. But you didn't ruin his life, I observed. He did that himself. That's what I realized. Trevor wasn't a victim of circumstances. He made choices, bad choices that hurt people. Becca twisted her coffee cup in her hands. I lost my job because of the scandal. My reputation in the real estate industry is destroyed. I'm working retail now, trying to rebuild. I guess I wanted you to know that I understand now. What Trevor did to you, he was capable of doing to anyone. I studied her face. She looked genuinely remorseful, but I wasn't interested in providing her with absolution. That wasn't my responsibility. I appreciate you telling me, I said finally, but I'm not looking to be friends or confidants. You participated in hurting me, even if Trevor manipulated you. That's something you'll have to live with. Becca nodded, accepting my response. I understand. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, for whatever that's worth. After she left, I sat alone with my coffee, processing the conversation. Part of me felt satisfaction that Becca had faced consequences too. Another part felt almost sorry for her. She'd been young and foolish, believing a man who was skilled at lying. But sympathy didn't erase her choices. She'd known Trevor was married. She'd accepted gifts bought with stolen money. She'd participated in the betrayal, even if she wasn't the architect of it. I finished my coffee and left. That chapter was closed. I had no interest in reopening it for Becca's peace of mind. 2 years after everything began, I attended a business conference in Chicago. During a networking event, I met a man named Connor Wells. He was a financial consultant, divorced like me, with an easy smile and genuine interest in conversation. We talked for an hour about business, travel, and life after divorce. Before the night ended, he asked for my number. I hesitated, old fears rising. Could I trust someone again? Would I even recognize the red flags if they appeared? But then I remembered who I was now. I wasn't the woman who'd ignored warning signs with Trevor. I was someone who paid attention, who documented, who protected herself. I gave Connor my number. We started dating slowly, both of us cautious after our previous marriages. He respected my boundaries. He was transparent about his life, his finances, his past. When I asked direct questions, he answered honestly without defensiveness. 6 months into dating, Connor asked about my divorce. I told him the whole story, waiting for his reaction. Would he think I was manipulative, cold, calculating? You protected yourself, Connor said when I finished. Trevor made his choices. You just made sure you didn't become his victim. That's not revenge, that's intelligence. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Not judgment, but understanding. We continued building our relationship carefully, both of us carrying scars from our pasts but willing to try again. I kept my business separate. I maintained my own accounts. I protected myself while still opening my heart. It was possible to do both, I'd learned. Trust and caution weren't opposites. 3 years after Trevor's phone call, I sold my house. It had served its purpose, securing my financial position in the divorce. But it held too many memories, both good and bad. I bought a smaller place, a modern condo downtown near my office. Connor helped me move, understanding when I needed space to process the transition and supporting me through moments of unexpected grief. Because despite everything Trevor had done, I'd still lost 16 years of my life. That was worth grieving, even if the relationship wasn't worth saving. I hosted a housewarming party in my new place. Friends filled the space with laughter and conversation. Holly pulled me aside at one point. You did it, she said. Built a whole new life. We all do, I replied. Eventually, some of us just have to burn down the old one first. She laughed. That's very philosophical for someone who orchestrated one of the most calculated divorces I've ever witnessed. Maybe that's what made it possible, I said. Being strategic instead of emotional. If I'd just reacted, I would have lost everything. Instead, I made sure Trevor faced real consequences. Now, looking back, I understand that what I did wasn't traditional revenge. I didn't destroy Trevor's life out of spite or anger. I simply documented his choices and ensured he couldn't escape the consequences. He destroyed himself through lying, cheating, and stealing. I just made sure everyone could see it clearly. Some people might judge my methods as cold or manipulative, but I know the truth. I was a woman who refused to be a victim. When Trevor decided to betray me, he assumed I would either crumble or rage uselessly. Instead, I planned. I gathered evidence. I protected my assets and my future. I acted strategically instead of emotionally. That's not villainy. That's survival. My business is thriving now, bigger than ever. My relationship with Connor is healthy and honest. My life is entirely my own, built on foundations I constructed myself. Trevor tried to take everything from me. Instead, he gave me the push I needed to become stronger, smarter, and more independent than I'd ever been. That's the real irony. His betrayal freed me. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's watching them destroy themselves while you build something better. That's exactly what I did. And I'd do it again without hesitation.